Well, Business Leadership South Africa's CEO, Busisiwe Mavuso, is confident that South Africa is starting to turn the tide on the economic front. Well, let's find out from the CEO herself, Busisiwe Mavuso, joining us this morning. Busisiwe, hello to you. So there's a lot to talk about as far as foreign direct investment. I'll bring into the conversation, of course, what's happening over in Dubai, the Dubai Expo. We're now talking about billions and billions of rands, trillions of rands from foreign direct investment. Why do you think we're making a turn for the best? Good morning.
Good morning, Gareth, and thank you very much for inviting me.
So why do you think we're now starting to turn the tide? You're suggesting this is a good thing. Some critics are saying that this sort of direct foreign investment isn't going to make much of a difference to the everyday person. Would you agree or disagree?
You know, Gareth, I think what we saw last week was quite interesting from the perspective that you saw a president that was actually very pragmatic, about the challenges that we're facing as a country. You saw a president that really did not seek to sweep under the carpet, the real challenges that South Africa is facing. You saw a president that was actually calling upon, the investors to say that, yes, you are coming into an environment that needs a lot of work. You're coming into an environment that needs your support, to be able to turn the tide around. You're coming into an investment, or coming into an environment which without your support, would not be able to actually change our economic misfortunes, as it were. So we really need you to help us, to work with some of the challenges in terms of fixing some of the challenges that we have as a country. So I think, that realization, and a reflection and an awareness of a need for pragmatism that came through from the president was quite refreshing, But I think you also saw, Gareth, an emergence of a pro-business ideological shift. Where government realizes that without the private sector coming into the party, without business working hand in hand with government, we are not going to achieve what we need to achieve as a country. We are not going to reach the economic growth levels that we need to reach to be able to arrest the high levels of unemployment that we're actually facing as a country. So I think that was actually important, that we are really realistic and upfront about what we're actually facing as a country. So I think that was the first.
And I think if we're realistic as well, Busisiwe, I'm sure you'll agree as well that while we are being very realistic and playing on the international stage, there are critics, and I'd like your thoughts on this, who are going to suggest that as far as the African market is concerned, while South Africa does have some good stories to tell, there are probably other countries in Africa that can do a better job for investors if they sent their money there instead. The obvious example is that of Nigeria, and very quickly followed by Kenya.
Gareth, there's absolutely no doubt about that. We have lost our position as the gateway to the African continent. I think we've been actually, we've slept on the job, as a country. I think we've been confused by the fact that we remain the most advanced economy in the continent, and we thought that that would be enough, for investors to keep on coming through, while we have neglected, to actually address some of the important issues that investors wanted to see. The truth of the matter is that the environment within which business operates in this country, needs a lot of work, to get it to a stage where it is actually conducive. And I think we've started seeing some of that emerging, Gareth, which was another positive. We did have the conference last week under, somewhat different conditions. We are sitting in an environment where government has agreed to change the electricity regulation to lift the license exemption to 100 megawatts for self-generation. We have had, the announcement on the ports front where they've opened up for the increased private sector participation, and they've agreed for the establishment of the Transnet National Ports Authority as a separate and independent company.
So from the big business perspective, Busisiwe, from the big business perspective, it does make sense. I agree with you that it looks like we are open for business. There are certain sectors, you mentioned electricity, energy, and the ports network, very important. Just before I say goodbye to you, though, we're going to talk to Devin Murrigan, eNCA business anchor, a bit later, about the unemployment rate. Those numbers coming out later today. What does a expo like this, what does direct foreign investment do for getting South African citizens and people within South Africa employed? How do we get on top of the unemployment rate when we look at something like direct foreign investment? It's all great to have these very high-end conversations about investments and business leaders, but what about South Africans who need jobs? Talk to me about that briefly before I say goodbye.
Gareth, we can't arrest unemployment without investment. You need investment to be able to make the economy to grow at the right levels. You know, the investment that has been committed, for instance, last week, as soon as it comes through, it means that there are going to be real projects happening on the ground. Real projects happening on the ground means that people need to be employed to be able to undertake those projects. You know, and I think that is how you get the economic activity to grow, and that is how you actually start to reach, you know, economic growth levels that are going to be beyond 2%. You remember our economic growth has not touched 2% since 2013. It's a recipe for disaster. It is precisely why we're sitting at 45.6% unemployment in terms of the expanded definition. And I think from the numbers that you're going to see today, the unemployment numbers.
And it's those numbers that I really will leave it here. It's with these numbers, BLSA, I'll leave it as my last question, I promise. 2% economic growth, over 35% unemployment, depending which number you're looking at, quite rightly, even close to 45% unemployment in our country. So there are critics who are going to say investment doesn't create jobs. What's your reaction?
That's absolutely not true. You know, if you understand how Economics 101 works, you will know that investment results to jobs. But I guess we cannot expect to see, you know, unemployment numbers coming down shortly after the investment conference last week. It cannot be. You know, you need to actually start to see these investments happening. You know, you need to see, you know, shovel-ready projects. You know, you need to see buildings, you know, being erected, you know, people digging ground, you know, so that is the type of activity that you actually need to see. But remember, that type of activity, Gareth, will not happen if there isn't anyone committing the money to actually undertake those projects, because government in this country is not in a position to give money to actually undertake those projects.
It's always good to speak to you. BLSA Mavuso, Business Leadership South Africa CEO, going to be watching what is happening with the foreign direct investment numbers, and also, as you can hear quite closely, what's going to happen with unemployment numbers a little bit later today here on eNCA.